Idealism prevails. Make the world a better place.
Hello and welcome to Idealism Prevails. My guest today is Isabel Scharrer, young doctor, blogger and world traveler. Isabel, it's a pleasure having you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Iris. I'm very happy to be here.
Isabel, you're 27 years old. 2015, you finished your studies of medicine, and instead of doing your specialization, you decided to do something different. You went to Greece, working in a refugee camp as a doctor. How did this decision come up? Why did you do that?
Ever since med school, I wanted to do a volunteering and also work with Doctors Without Borders. But since to do so, you have to have 2 years of practical experience. I just got itchy feet and I couldn't wait that long. So I always wanted to go abroad, maybe to Africa or to India to do a volunteering. But since the problems at that time were happening actually in Europe, it was a good opportunity for me to help out where the help was needed the most at that moment. And I was looking up different organizations which would take a doctor which just graduated. It was initially very difficult to find any organization to do so. But eventually I found one because due to the crisis, a lot of new organizations started to build up, and so that was good for me.
So how did it work? So you just wrote an email to that organization telling them, I just finished my studies, I would like to do something, I would like to help, and then they got in touch with you?
Yeah, I was researching online, and yes, I wrote them an email. And they said I would be very welcome, and so I just booked my flight and went there. Yes.
There. So where in Greece have you been then? Which refugee camp have you been?
Initially I went to Lesbos, and I was walking, Lesbos is the island where the boats are arriving from Turkey, like the dinghies. And initially I was walking at the coast, taking the boats on and walking on the spot at the moment when the boats are arriving. And then I went to the Moria refugee camp, but actually to the unofficial one, because there were two, an official one, the unofficial one. But in the official one there were only big organizations like Doctors Without Borders and Medics du Monde. And I was in the one next to it. And then I went to Idomeni, which was the big refugee camp on the border to Macedonia.
What was the situation in the camp like? Like, how many people were there? How many volunteers were working there? How was everything organized? Yeah.
Actually, the first refugee camp I've been to in Lesbos, it was quite organized, and there were not that many people, maybe 2,000. And there were enough volunteers at that moment, I would say. There can never be enough, but it was quite okay. And it was also, for a refugee camp, quite clean, and they had food, they had snacks and tea, and a soup, which was available all day long. And it was really well organized. There were volunteers from all over the world. There was even a playground, since there were mostly Pakistani people living there. They had a cricket playground, and also a place for children to play, and a tent where they can just relax. It was very nice, I would say. And all the volunteers, they did, there were some Italian people who did a little pizza oven, so they would bake pizza. And it was very colorful and kind of a happy place, let's say a hippie camp kind of.
So the atmosphere in the camp was good?
Yeah, when I arrived there it was quite good. But then when I went to Idomeni, it was something totally different, it changed totally. It was the opposite, it was a really, really big area, and there were different camps all over the area. But the biggest one, which was right on the border to Macedonia, there were about 10,000 people living there. And
wow.
The conditions were very bad, the sanitary facilities, and also the medicine, the facilities they had for the doctors, they were just not enough. Like there were not enough doctors there to treat this big amount of people. And everybody had to live in tents that they had to bring themselves, or sometimes volunteers were handing out some tents. But it was raining a lot there, and it was very cold in the night, and the floor was very muddy, so all the water would come in the tent, and the toilets were in really bad conditions, and yeah.
It sounds really tough, yeah. I guess you've heard many stories from people who just came with the boat to Greece. Have you heard like what were the most intense or emotional stories you've heard from people taking the boat, or if they're traveling? Or, yeah.
Yes, of course, we got in touch with people a lot. Also, like sometimes they didn't speak English, so we were speaking through a translator. And obviously, when the boat were coming, like that moment when they were arriving, and people didn't share any stories, but just to see the expression on their faces, like the moment they got off the dinghy, because they were spending like sometimes 8-10 hours on the open sea with like small babies, and the dinghies were full of water and about to drown, like so many people died. It was just really touching to see their faces, and you could see that they really had like death written on their face, and they were shivering all over the body, and that was really touching. But then, of course, like during my night shifts in the camp, I got a little bit closer to some refugees and could hear their stories. Young Pakistani men, which were like 16, 17 years old, who would have done all the travel either by foot or taking different transport methods like cars or buses or whatever they could find. They had a really long journey from Pakistan to Turkey and then to Greece, and they said they gave up everything to have a better life and to have hope. And it was just interesting and nice to hear their hopes in life. Like there were many who were hoping to come to Italy, for example, because they love football, and just to also see the perspective of young men who live in a country which has terrorism and other political problems happening. And also, of course, there were many people from Syria who escaped war with babies and like 2-year-old kids who had to go through a lot, who were treated badly in Turkey. And the most, like the worst is for the children, because they're still so small. Like I met one time, I remember after my night shift, I met this young girl, and she was 3 years old, and she had dislocated shoulder, because the smuggler in Turkey was like pushing her too hard, and she had this dislocated shoulder for like a few days till she managed to come to our medical facility in the refugee camp. But we sent her to the hospital since she was in so much pain, and she was just crying and in a terrible condition.
Wow. Was there like any support also for the people working there? I mean, I guess, you know, for you as a young woman going there, wanting to help, there are sort of really intense stories, intense pictures you've been seeing there. How did you handle that? I mean, like of seeing all this, hearing all these terrible stories about what the people have been through. How did you handle that?
Actually, there were psychologists and psychiatrists volunteering with us as well, which you could go and talk to if you would have any problem. And volunteers were helping out other volunteers, like you would always have somebody to talk to. But for the time being, like you were so stressed, like I was sleeping so less because there was always something to do. Like the night you could go to the coast and see if there are any boats coming. The day you would be at the clinic, and then there was another project on the port where you were handing out clothes and tea and food for the refugees who would take the ferry to Athens. And so you actually, like, even though you were seeing so many things, you were not really thinking about that because you were so busy all the time. So only when you had like a day off, which I had only in Idomeni one time, it actually hit me really hard, because then I had the time to think, and it was really bad. So it was better for me to just continue and not think too much about it.
But then did it hit you afterwards, after like finishing the project and going back home? Have you then, because I can imagine that maybe, as you just said, like if you're having a break and then you can, you can start thinking, that suddenly all this energy hits you, or was that okay?
Actually, afterwards, like I spent a few days in Athens, which was really good to just get a little bit of peace. But when I was leaving Greece, I was very devastated, like emotionally. But then again, I went into my new project, so I was again busy and thinking about that. So.
Have you had any moments of really fear, or just like thinking like, I'm so exhausted or I'm so scared, why am I doing this? What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Have you had any like of this desperate moments?
No, I never thought why I'm doing that, because I really wanted to do that I felt like I'm exactly at the place where I want to be. But I remember the last night in Lesbos when I saw like the last boat arriving and people screaming, and the thing was that we had a WhatsApp group, and sometimes we were communicating with the refugees, and then they would tell us the location they are at on the sea, and you could listen to the voice messages the refugees were sending from the dinghy. And even though I don't understand Arabic or Farsi, like there were people translating that, and you could hear like women screaming they lost their children in the dinghy, and like her newborn baby, and that it's not breathing anymore. And just to hear the voice of that woman, even though I didn't understand the languages, was like so terrifying. And when I was there, when the last boat arrived, I was just like, this is too much. Like it was good for me to go to Idomeni and change the location a little bit.
How long in the end did you stay in Greece?
I was in Greece for about 6-7 weeks in total. Yes.
And that was the plan from the beginning, or did you want it to stay longer or shorter, or was this from the beginning
I didn't had any plan at the beginning. I just went there and thought I will see how long I feel to do this.
Feel to do that, okay. And when you, well then after 6 or 7 weeks, you went back home, and then you felt a new decision of doing another volunteering project.
Yes. Then I also, as I told previously, I always wanted to go abroad to do a volunteering, also to get more in contact with another country and the culture and everything. So I decided to go to Nepal, and I was always fascinated about this country for actually no big reason. It just really fascinated me, and I coordinated it with also a hike to the base camp of Mount Everest initially, which was really good for me to just relax and take a little bit of peace after the stressful time in Greece. And after that, I went to West Nepal to volunteer there in a rural hospital, which was only accessible by walking there, like they have no road system.
You had organized that before going there, or did you also do that with an organization, or did you just organize it on your own, like, sending an email to the hospital, like saying like you want to do volunteering there?
I didn't do it through any organization, because most of the organizations would want like a lot of money to organize the overall volunteering experience for you. So I researched online about people who did similar projects, and I found a link to an evangelic organization in Berlin. So I wrote to the coordinator there, and he gave me the address of the hospital in Nepal, and then I spoke directly with the hospital manager there.
Okay. And they told you, you just spoke with them there, and they told you like, yes?
Yes, they were very happy to hear, and they said, you're very welcome to volunteer with us, and we will be waiting for you. And there was also no time limit or no big problem. They said they had a house there, and that it would be very happy.
So and then you just packed your stuff together, booked a flight, and just flew to Nepal, not knowing what was what, how will it be like there?
Exactly. I was researching a little bit online, but I actually researched a little bit wrong, I guess, because I thought it would be very cold there. But actually it was like 40, 42 degrees. So I was a little bit mistaken on that one. But besides that, yeah, I didn't have so concrete information. But yeah, you can never be exactly prepared for what comes.
And how was it like arriving at the hospital? Just, just like in my imagination, you coming there with your big backpack, arriving there, not knowing what was happening. What was the hospital like? Was it a big one? Where in Nepal actually was the hospital?
The hospital was in West Nepal, in Rukum district. I actually took a bus for about 24 hours from Kathmandu. Like, there are two ways to get to the hospital. There's also the possibility to take a flight, but it's happening very rarely. And I'm a little bit scared of flying, especially with small airplanes. So I took the other route. But even there, it was like monsoon season, so they were saying that landslides can happening. And since there's only one road, it can happen that for a week or so the road would be blocked. But thankfully nothing like that happened, and we got there because I was traveling with another doctor from the hospital after 24 hours, and then they came to pick us up, like walking, and from there we walked to the hospital. It was not too far away from the street, it was like half an hour walking. And then everybody was very nice and very welcoming. The house we were living at, it was just across the hospital, so everything was in one place. And
how big was the hospital, or how does a hospital in Nepal look like? How it's like?
It had about 60 beds, and some beds, like if there are too many people, they would sleep outside in the open. And it was not too big, but not too small. Like, it had everything. They had a laboratory and operation theater and an emergency room and really everything they would need to treat somebody, like in that circumstances. So it was okay. I didn't had any imagination in my mind how it could be. Like, I actually thought it would be smaller, but it was quite well organized. And
how many people or how many doctors were working there? And were you the only Western doctor there, or were there other volunteers?
There are 2 permanent doctors working there, which are like on duty kind of 24 hours because they just lived across the hospital, so they are always on call. And there was 1 dentist and 1 paramedic working there. And at that moment, I was the only Western doctor. There were some other volunteers, like a nutritionist. And but there are other doctors who come to the hospital regularly to volunteer, like a Japanese doctor who comes like every year for a few months.
How was it like, being a white woman working as a doctor? How did the people react on you? Were you accepted, or were they a bit like skeptic, trusting more the Nepalese doctors? How was it like?
Actually, in Nepal, they trust sometimes white people more than they trust Nepali people. They have this image about white people that everything in the West is like better and different. So everybody would be like very interested in telling me their problems, of course, through a translator. And also they have this perception about white people that we don't like to walk, because sometimes we had to walk for a few hours, like 4 hours, to get to health camp, which we were organizing like in a school, or like a mother-child health camp to tell them about hygiene and just do a screening of the overall people's problem. And they would be like, no, you cannot come with us because you don't know how to walk. Like, white people, they take motorbikes and buses and airplanes. And I was like, it's fine, like I know how to walk. And so I really had to convince them, like, for a few hours to take me. And also they have the perception that all white people have a lot of money. So I would have people asking me for money, like, regularly. It happens, yes.
And have you had any moments like where you were really scared sending the right situation? I mean, you studied medicine for many years, but I guess it's like if you've been working like for 10 years as a doctor, it's easier to feel the right decision. So have you got any moments of like, am I doing the right thing? Or was there another doctor you could ask? Or were you just like, I know what I'm doing?
No, of course, I was never alone. I was never working like by myself. We were always like working all together, and I could always ask somebody, or they would tell me. Like it was never like they would just leave me and do whatever.
Okay.
No.
And what were the most like emotional moments for you in this hospital, or the most emotional moments or people or you've met?
Well, I was very happy about the overall situation. Like the people who were working with me, like everybody was really kind, and also the energy they had there, it was really good. Like they were living in very poor conditions, but nobody was complaining. Like there was no AC, of course, and there was not even a fan like in the living conditions or in the hospital. They only had a fan in the operation theater and in the observation room, but it was really hot, but nobody was really complaining, and they were really doing it, like, of course not for the money because they wouldn't be paid that much, but like really to help people, and they were really committed to do that, and you could feel it. And also like we were praying like in the evening, in the morning. It was very spiritual, and people were playing the guitar and singing, and it was very good environment in that matter. And of course I was very moved by the stories and the people who would come in, who would live like with less than $1 a day, and so many people are afraid to come to the hospital because you have to pay there. Like healthcare is not for free, and they for example, one time I met this boy and he had an open wound, and like he broke his arm and he had an open wound on his arm, and his mother didn't want to bring him to the hospital because she didn't have any money to pay for it. So she was thinking about it a very long time, but she just said she cannot. So the village was like collecting money to donate to her to go to the hospital, and just to see that, it was very nice. And when they arrived, the hospital actually said, look, we are doing it for free, like because it gets enough donations that they can help very poor people, like to give free healthcare as well as free food, because sometimes they cannot even pay for their food. So it was nice to see that we were actually able to help everyone who was coming in.
I've also read in your blog a story about a girl that came with her dad for like they were like walking for many hours, and she had water sort of in her tummy, in her stomach.
Yeah, she was coming in with ascites. She had a lot of water in her belly, and also there it was very difficult for the dad to bring her in because, like, I don't know, maybe people were thinking that she's pregnant or something, so they took a very long time also to walk to the hospital, as you said. But eventually he did, and that was a good decision. He already came to the hospital previously when I was not there, but then he left again because he had 11 children at home, and he could not leave them alone. Also against the doctor's order. So that's how the condition of the girl got so bad. But finally, we managed to heal the situation.
Wow. Mm-hmm. You also told me that in Nepal that there's a big pressure on young people because it's really important for them to pass their exams, and that there are many like suicides there because the pressure is so high.
Yeah, actually, even in the hospital, there were a lot of cases with young people coming in who would take like rat poison and try to commit suicide because of that pressure. That's unfortunately happening.
Wow, this is scary. But why is it like that? Can't you like? Is it like the parents or the government, or why is this?
It's more like if you don't manage to get a high grade, maybe you cannot be offered a scholarship, for example. And it's also like the overall pressure of the kids they're having. Maybe in some families, the parents, maybe the society. Like I haven't spoken with anybody directly about that matter, so I don't know exactly, but that's what I've.
How was it like? So you've been for 2 months. You stayed in the hospital in Nepal.
Yeah, approximately 6 weeks, and then I went to another hospital, which was in a little bit bigger village or city, town, let's say, and that was again different, but it was like accessible by the road, so it was a different experience there.
Okay. And how was you said it was bigger, so more people working there? Was it like more like a Western hospital? Oh, as far as you can say, like a Western hospital, but you know, like
it wasn't like a Western hospital, but it was just different. It was seen as the prototype hospital of Nepal in some kind of way. And it was well organized, like very well organized, and there were more doctors working there. There were like 6-7 doctors working there, so it was just bigger. Like it was in a proper town, and it wasn't like a rural hospital.
And how far would you say, like what you've seen in Greece or what you've seen in Nepal about working there? Did it change something, like your how to see life, how to live? Did it, make something change?
Well, for sure, it changed me in many ways. One of them that I had to adapt to different situations. Also, by living like in conditions that I wasn't used before, like in the hygienic kind of level, or also just in the food, because like for example in Nepal they eat literally almost every day dal bhat, which is rice and lentil soup. So it's like every day almost the same food, and the heat and everything, and also the attention I was getting, because the moment I was getting out of the house, or like for example going for a jog, there were so many people following me, because everybody was very interested in where I'm from and what's my name and what's my story, because I'm a foreigner, and people in that village didn't see so many foreigners. So I was never really alone. I didn't have this privacy that I was used to having. So I had to adapt to all these different moments and situations. But I learned that I can adapt, I guess, to almost everything which comes along my way, and that's a good thing.
Wow. Have you had any like bad experiences or moments where you were scared, or just like all positive experiences, like being the people nice and
Actually,
interested?
No, I haven't had any bad experiences so far. I was just happy, like for example, also in Greece, to see the unity of the people, and that so many people from all over the world come to help for a good cause, and that everybody's so committed to it, and paying from their own pockets, because nobody got paid for the work they were doing. Like they had to pay for their accommodation and everything else. So that was really nice.
So after Nepal, you went to India. You've been traveling for then another few months through India, and also today, like in a few hours, you will be going back to India, flying back to Delhi. So what have you been doing in India? Like what were your experiences there? What did you do there? Also volunteering or just traveling, or where have you been?
I didn't do any volunteering there yet, but I'm definitely planning to do that. I was doing different things. Like it started with an adventure. Let's say again, it was like a motorbike tour to Ladakh, which is like in the far north of India, and it was like on the highest motorable roads in the world, and that experience was amazing, because just the landscape, and that there were no people and wild horses and yaks along the way, and it was really nice and enjoyable for sure. And I visited many different villages, like also on the border to Pakistan, which was like that village, like one specific village which was called Turtuk. It was only open to tourism in 2011, I think. And it was really amazing to see those things, and to get more in touch with the people living there, and the culture, like the Buddhist culture.
And was that your plan? So had you planned that, like after Nepal, have you had a plan like where you wanted to go in India, or did you just like let things happen and meeting people and going to different places?
I didn't have a plan, no, I didn't have a plan. I was actually not traveling alone. I was traveling with Saurabh, which I met on Everest Base Camp. So from that moment on, things just started to evolve. And first we did that trip together, and then we went to Rajasthan to do a project called Living on One. Rajasthan is in the west of India, in the desert. and we chose a village which was not too far away from the city of Jaisalmer. But still, there were like, I think, 80 people or 100 people living in that village. And the idea was to live like they are living, like exactly what they're doing, with approximately $1 a day. And it was very interesting, again, to adapt to the situation. Like, we had a house without doors, and it was very, very hot during the day, of course. And actually, they don't grow anything there besides like a few vegetables. And they didn't have so much food to eat, like a little bit of rice and chapati, which is like this thin bread. And we had to build like a clay oven where we could make fire and make the chapati. And
how long did you do that? How long did you stay there? How long did you live for $1 a day?
Not too long. It was like 3-4 days.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not too long. But it was actually really difficult to find a village to do so, because we were searching for a lot of time. But some villages, like when we entered to speak with the village heads, like one time they were throwing stones at us because they thought we were invaders, or I don't know what, so we had to leave immediately. And one time people were just like, everybody was coming and trying to take things, and so because they're not really used to foreigners and people entering the villages, and they just want their peace and to be left alone. So it was really difficult. Like for approximately 2 weeks we were searching something, and then finally we managed to speak with the village head, and we managed to do it in that village.
Wow. And you were traveling with Surab?
Mm-hmm.
Surab? Am I pronouncing his name correctly?
Yes,
yeah,
Surab.
Surab. So I guess it's easier traveling in India with a man. Have you had there any experiences that you could feel like, okay, it's now I'm traveling with a man, so this is easy? Or have you heard stories about women traveling alone? How is it like?
Surab is actually from India, so of course that was really helpful, also with the language barrier. But in many places they don't speak Hindi or just a little bit, so sometimes it was also a little bit complicated. But I didn't meet any woman traveling alone, but I met like women traveling together in pairs. Yeah. But honestly, I would not feel too comfortable traveling by myself in India. So of course I'm really happy that I'm traveling with somebody.
And India is a really large country, so you've been to the north and to the south of India. What is the differences between the north and the south? Or is there an area was it like it's safer, or it's easier for traveling, or more difficult, or what is between the north and the south, sort of the?
The north and the south, they're very different in many ways. Well, just the landscape changes a lot, and the people, like in the south, they are much more darker than in the north. And also the dressing changes a lot. Like in the south, sometimes men would walk topless and just with a kind of towel, let's say, around their waist, and they drink coffee there, which they don't do in the north at all. And the food is also really different, like let's say a little bit more healthy than in the north. And the people, they're a little bit more harsh in their own way, and they speak differently. They don't speak Hindi, they have their own regional language, and otherwise they speak English better than they would do in the north. And there are also many more Christians living there. Like the south is prevalent with Christianity, and I guess these are the biggest differences. And they are also much more silent. Like in the north, for example, because we took a train which went from Agra, from the north to the south, it was like 2.5 days of train ride. And initially, like at every stop, there are people coming in the train to sell things, and they would scream like "Garam chai," and they would like really scream.
What does garam chai mean?
It means hot tea,
okay.
And they would really scream. So you would wake up every time somebody enters. But then the closer you got to the south, it would be like very silent. It would be like garam chai, like very silent. Like you wouldn't hear them, and they were really not selling as much as they would do in the north. So like to see all these changes, it was very interesting.
And have you had sort of like a cultural shock? You know, like being the first time in India, it's a completely different culture. Have you had like any situation where you just arrived and feeling like, whoa, what's going on here?
Well, actually, I came from Nepal, so I was a little bit more used to the situation there, but still going to India was like, even from Kathmandu, from the capital of Nepal, it was a little bit shocking because there are just much more people and there are so many crowded areas where like you cannot pass there, like you're always in a big crowd of people and it's dirty and there are cows in front of your hostel and there's a urinal in front of your hostel and public showers and you can see everything. It's just like in that place I was living in the center of Delhi where like most tourists live. There's like also the market, so it's always very dirty and trashy and it's really messy. Like you see everything, people lying on the street and it's just the amount of people, which is shocking.
And what was your favorite place you've been now in India or in Nepal? What was the area that really touched you most, or when you said like, wow, I would like to go back there?
What touched me the most was definitely Ladakh, because I could attend 2 different Buddhist festivals at that time. One which is Naropa festival, it's happening only every 12 years, so we were really lucky that we could attend that. And I was always very interested in Buddhist culture and so it was really nice for me to attend those festivals and to just get so close to the people and to their culture and it's just a very special place.
Wow. And now, I just mentioned it before, in a few hours you will go to the airport, you will fly back to India, staying there for another few months, is your plans? What are your plans? Where are you going to go? You're flying now to Delhi, but where are you going to travel next to in India?
Yeah, I'm flying to Delhi. I will be staying there a few days and then go back to Jammu and Kashmir, which is the region. Ladakh is a part of that, but this time not to Ladakh but to Srinagar. Because I wanted to see the Roosevelt Shrine.
What is that?
Yeah, people say, or the books of Kashmir say that Yusuf, which means the son of Joseph, was there. So Jesus Christ, they say, went to Kashmir and was spreading his words there as well. And they say that the Roosevelt Shrine is actually his tomb. So I wanted to visit that and have a look. And after that, probably to Calcutta. I really wanted to volunteer in the House of Mother Teresa. And
are you already in contact there, or are you just going to go there and see if you can?
I was researching it some time back, but I haven't been in contact so far. But that's the idea so far.
Wow. So how long are you going to stay now in India? Like, what's the plan of doing your volunteering?
For sure till September.
September.
Yes.
Wow. And what would you, like, have you got any advice for people who would also like to, do something, change the world, do a volunteering? What is your advice if, maybe also just like young students who just finished their medicine studies, or, just like other people who just want to do a volunteering, what to do?
I guess my advice is just to follow your heart, because you mostly know what's right and what's wrong for yourself. And you shouldn't feel too pressured by society to do the way other people do it. Just do what's right for you. And also not to be scared. Like initially, of course, I was scared to go to Greece because all the newspapers are writing it's dangerous and it's that. And you mostly hear bad news about everything. And of course, this is influencing you. That's normal and natural. But you will always meet nice people everywhere you go. And just have trust in it that it will be a good experience, and then it will be a good experience. And also you shouldn't organize everything from the start to the end, because it will go different anyway. Like, for example, I didn't have any place to stay when I arrived. When I came with the ferry to Lesbos, I didn't know where to sleep. So I was very lucky because I met Spanish volunteers, which were firemen, and they took me and the other girl I was with, and they said, you can stay with us as long as you want. So there will always be somebody who's helping you out, especially if you're in the area of volunteering. And also when people say don't do this and don't do that and it's dangerous, like nobody knows, because everybody has a different thinking of what's dangerous for oneself. So you should just see and do it see and do it how you think that it's right. And if you don't feel comfortable in a situation, get out of it. And that's basically that. Don't be scared.
Well, believing that everything will work out.
Just don't overthink it.
Cool, great. Your articles, I just said it before, like you're also a blogger, so you're writing articles which you can read on www.idealismprevails.com. There are articles about your volunteering in Greece, in Nepal, what your adventures in India. So we're really looking forward to reading more about what's going on there, about your traveling.
Thank you.
Isabel, it was a pleasure having you here.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And I hope, like after coming back from India, maybe we're going to do another interview, and you're going to tell us how your volunteering in India went on, how your traveling went on.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Idealism Prevails. Have a nice day, and thank you.
Idealism prevails. Make the world a better place.